So in Sefer Maimar, usually they'll try to follow the order of the year to some extent, because, like, it's convenient that you open up, you want to find a Maimar that's like relevant to the times. We need to live with the times. We're very, we live with the times over here. We're not living under a rock. So they have the Maimarim in the order of the year. So in Sefer Maimarim, we'll look at Chelik Beis. There's a Maimar that seems to be a little bit out of place. When you think about it, it actually isn't out of place. The Maimar was said on Achron Shel Pesach of Tavshin Mem Vav. And the Dibur Maskal is V'avdi David Melech Aleihem, which is very shaykh to the Inyan of Mashiach. So you might say, why is this Maimar over here? When I say over here, you guys don't have the Sefer in front of you. You need to make copies. See, that's part of the criticism I'm going to have in the share that I need to make when I listen to it again. That's the Shem. It's going to say, hey, you need to make copies. But it's over here right after the Maimer of Hanukkah. So the reason why it's over here is because right now in these past few parshas, from Parshas Vayeshev through Parshas Vayigash, a little bit into Parshas Vayechi, you have a very big contrast between Yosef, who's this king. He's living in Mitzrayim. He's ruling over everything. The ultimate rags to riches story. He was in prison, and in one day he went from being a prisoner to being one of the most powerful men in the entire world, arguably the most powerful, because he had Parei with a little bit of blackmail over there. And then you have the Shvatim that they're sitting around and they're pasturing sheep, and they come and they have this clash, and it's so interesting to see. Yosef, from the beginning of the story, had this clash with them, and then they go on into Parshas Miketz. Yosef rises up, and they're still, watching their sheep. They're still, simple people. They come to Yosef, and you have this notion of Yehuda says, we're here to kill or to be killed, and it's a very fascinating contrast, but more than just a fascinating contrast in terms of I don't know, whatever kind of fancy literature analyzation, of course, some professor might have on the Bible. Besides for that, which the Torah has many different layers, and it's interesting on all of them. But besides for that, you also have all of the spiritual connotations of what this means. So, one famous line is Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and there's a lot of chassidus said on this line that Yehuda approached Yosef. What does it mean Yehuda approached Yosef? What does that represent? So, one of the notions is, it says V'avdi David Melech Aleim V'rei Echad Yeh L'cholam. Again, this is the beginning of the Maimer, and I could just dive in from this essentially. V'yidu Maimer kidush Asmeri V'chomi Admor Nasidirenu Al Pasuk. The Rebbe refers to the feet of the crab as Nasidirenu in Tavshin Mem Vav, something to note. But Shem Avarasham, the pasuk Zeh Kaya Malach Mashiach and Nikra Shem David, that this pasuk is referring to the king Mashiach, who is called David. David Malach Mashiach, David the anointed king. V'teichina Inyanu, the last of Mashiach David Rei Echad U'Kolam Shalayechetzu Eid L'Shtei Mamlaches, says that there's going to be one king for everyone. The implication is that when you say there's going to be one king for everyone, is that everyone isn't really, seemingly isn't shaykh to having one king. However, there's going to be a chiddush when Mashiach comes that even though not everyone is shaykh to having one king, when Mashiach comes, there will be one king for everyone. Mashiach. So, to be Yisrael Hayu Bez Mamlachis, that Israel originally had two kings, two monarchies, Malchus Bez David and Malchus Bez Yosef, Ephraim. There was the king of the Davidic line, which we all know and love, and then there's the king of Malchus Bez Yosef, which is from Ephraim, Rechavam. Yeravam. There were a lot of kings in that line. It didn't always fit B'dafka in that family, but in general, it was from Shevet Yosef. Shemalchi Bez David, Hayu Mishevet Yehuda, Malchi Bez Yosef, Hayu Mishevet Yosef. The kings of David were from Shevet Yehuda, and the kings of Yosef were from Yosef. But in the future, there won't be two kingdoms. And this is part of the pasuk in Tanakh. The implication when it says that they will no longer be divided into two kingdoms means that you would think that they should be divided into two kingdoms. That there's a reason to say that they should be divided into two kingdoms. So the Rebbe asks, "My asfar shel also love you based on lochis. What's the svar that when Mashiach comes? We're going to have ganzi Yiddishkeit all together." I'm very curious if Mashiach is going to be a Litvak or a Chassid, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I mean, it doesn't definitely be. It could also be modern Orthodox maybe, but like whatever it's going to be, everyone is going to be following Mashiach. And you would think, why would there be any divide? It's going to be like, that's going to be, ultimately everyone's waiting to see who it's going to be, and everyone's going to see it. And if it's going to be like the Rebbe, all the Masagim are going to be like, okay, fine. Maybe if it's going to be, I don't know, Rav Shach or something like that, I feel like the Babashers are not going to go that easily. But ultimately, whoever Mashiach is, he's going to rebuild the base of Mikdash, he's going to bring Karbanis, and it's going to come to a point people are going to be like, okay, fine. It is what it is. What's the svara to say there's going to be two kings when Mashiach comes? It's going to be Mashiach, Melech HaMashiach, who's going to teach Torah to Gans Klal Yisrael, and Merach Ladoin, and V'nochal of Ruach Hashem, Ruach Avinu, Ruach, all of these things. And how could you think, how is a shaykh to come into the mind that there's going to be two kings? Two kingdoms, two lineages. How is a shaykh? Gam Tzarech Lahavim, we also need to understand. Ma'u v'ados ilui b'zeh, sheDavid v'shevet Yehuda yeh melech aleim v're'ech l'kulam. We also need to understand what's the great advantage that David from Shevet Yehuda is going to be the king over them, and is going to be the one shepherd for them all. L'cheira matzinu ma'ila b'Yosef l'gabe Yehuda. Seemingly, there's a great ma'ila of Yosef l'gabe Yehuda. Dehine b'Yosef Yehuda atzvam harei Yosef haya melech al kol echav kelul Yehuda. Yosef was a king over all of the brothers, including over Yehuda. And the Rebbe is actually Messiah to Maimer and Terer, but like it's not just a one-off concept the Rebbe is throwing out. No, it's an established fact that Yosef was king, and the notion is that even back then, Yosef was the king over Yehuda. With all of the spiritual implications, Yosef was taka on a higher darga. Yosef was tzaddik elyon. It's a concept that's explained in Chassidus. He was like a ben, and all the shvatim were like avodim. First, this is also explained in the dreams of Yosef, that Yosef said, in my dream, there were 11, sheets of wheat, and there were 11 stars, and the sun and the moon, and they all bowed down to me, and one of the 11 was Yehuda. There's also the Maila of Yosef. Yosef ruled over 10 shvatim. The Malchus of Yehuda was only over 2 shvatim, because after Shlomo Melech, the Malchus got split up a little bit, and Hashem took 10 shvatim and gave it to Yeravam, and he said the only reason why I'm leaving Malchus David with some shvatim is because I promised David that he would be a king eternally. So Malchus David is going to last no matter what, and he said, I don't know if I said Yeravam, he told Yeravam that if you taka serve me properly, you too will have this permanent promise of eternal kingship, and he didn't. But which is why we're only Malchus based David people. You don't really hear about Malchus based Yosef in that sense. It hasn't really continued throughout the ages. I don't know anyone that traces themselves back to Yeravam ben Nevat. I don't know who would be too proud to be traced back to Yeravam ben Nevat. But the point is that Malchus based David wasn't as big of a king as Yosef was. Yosef was a king over Mamash Gans Klal Yisrael. Malchus based David wasn't. We also need to understand the Teichen of these inyanim in Aveda in these days. That all of the Giluyim that we're going to have in the future when Mashiach comes are dependent on what we do down here in the Golus over here. Razal and the Chacham said, that today is the time to do the Avodah, and in the future is the time that we receive the reward. And whatever we do over here in Golos, it's not just that we're going to do it and it's going to be an unrelated reward. That it's all part of the same thing. There's a notion of schar mitzvah, that when you do a mitzvah, the reward is the connection that you get through the mitzvah, but we can't properly appreciate the connection in Golos. So we're going to appreciate the connection when Mashiach comes, which means that there's a direct correlation between the revelation that's going to be when Mashiach comes and the avodah that we do over here. You could technically, intellectually appreciate all of the revelations that will be when Mashiach comes by properly appreciating the avodah that we have over here. It's not hard to properly appreciate the avodah that we have over here, especially when it's when you're doing the avodah, when you're sitting and learning about the avodah, the theoreticals of the avodah. Then maybe you can understand. Doing the avodah is a little bit harder to understand, but in general, you can appreciate the avodah. You can appreciate the Giluyim when Mashiach comes through the avodah of this world. So we need to understand this difference between Yosef and Yehuda. That's essentially the point. The concept is the difference between Yosef and Yehuda, is understood from the names Yosef and Yehuda themselves. By the way, any questions? I didn't want to know. Okay. So you can understand from the difference of the names of Yosef and Yehuda themselves. The Yehuda who milashon Haidah. Yehuda is a lashon of Haidah. When Yehuda was born, his mother Leah said, "Hapam v'das Hashem," that I'm going to praise Hashem, and his name is derived. That's why she called his name Yehuda. It's derived from the notion of Haidah, of praising. Yosef who milashon Esafa, and Yosef is milashon Esafa. Yosef was called Yosef because she said that Hashem should increase for me another son. Esafa means increase. So this is explained in the Psukim. And in a person, it's the difference between the ability that a person has to do something versus the ability that a person has to think something. The power which is connected to Haidah, so the ability that a person has which is connected to giving thanks, giving praise, in humanity in general, and particularly in Yidden, that we have a chelik kamimal, we have an neshama. The neshama is able to more properly praise the Eibusher than any other thing that exists. So who koyach hamaisa? It is the koyach hamaisa, the ability to do. In order to do something, that there should be an actual action that is performed. There needs to be Haidah. I need to explain a little bit what Haidah. There needs to be Haidah and Kfiyah, and I'll explain why. What's the inyan of Haidah? What's the concept of saying I'm going to give thanks? The concept of saying I'm going to give thanks is that I appreciate that there's something that was done for me that I wasn't on the level of doing it. If someone does like a favor for me, that like I have something that I'm going to do, I'm about to do it, someone says, I'll do that for you. And it's not that I needed the time. It's I wanted to do it myself. It's not that it was a chore for me. It's not that it was something that I wasn't interested in. It's something that I was fine with doing, and someone came in and they did it for me. It's not reason to say thanks. The polite thing to do might be to say thanks because the person didn't realize, the person thought they were doing you a favor. But if the person knew everything that was going on, they knew that this was something that you're totally fine with doing, they knew that this is something that you want to do, and they did it for you anyway, it's not a reason to say thanks. They didn't do you a favor. Thanks is when there's something, I could have done it myself maybe, but something that you did, you stepped in and you helped me out. And that means that I'm saying thanks. I'm being made to you. I'm saying that there's some advantage that you had in that moment that you gave to me, and when I say thanks, I'm leaning into that. I'm saying thank you. Gratitude. Gratitude. But the gratitude comes from the notion of you, something that was higher than me, like help me out in that sense. And the inyan of Haidah is b'pashtos. There's another explanation of Haidah. They're all going to tie in. But when you have when you're made into something, when you have something that let's say you're having an argument. Yes, there's two meanings of Haidah. Haidah means thanks, and Haidah means admission. And they're really, in a sense, part of the explanations are related. They're not just two words that are homonyms. I think that's what they call it. They're not just homonyms. When a person admits in an argument, again, what they're saying is that there's a reason. There was a reasoning. There was an idea that I didn't properly grasp it. Now I grasp it, and I'm being made that. I'm admitting that that idea, which was above me, which I now have, I'm admitting to it. So, and the Rebbe says he's admitting to something that isn't necessarily understood by him, or it could be opposite what he thought originally, or it could be opposite what he thinks possibly, but he sees that he's wrong now. So the inyan zehu b'koyach asiyah b'peil. This inyan is in actual action. Why? When a person does an action, he's taking his will, and we're going to discuss this in a second as Hashem. He's taking his will and he's lowering it down until it comes down into this action. And this yirida in every person, and particularly in a yid, he yirida levira amikta. It's a very great yirida. It says to like the lowest, like trenches. And therefore, there needs to be an admission and a bending down. So now, just to explain a little bit. I'm sure that we've all thought at some point, what's the advantage of humans over animals, right? You know, the animals that go around, they do their things. The animals seem to be very intelligent. And usually you end up coming up with, human life is just very complex. Human life, we have all these intricate desires, and with animals, they go around and they say they want to eat, they want to drink, they want to sleep, they want to mate, and that's about it. And maybe they want to play, but it's not too complex. Humans, we have all of these complex desires and wills and ideas, and they all have this very great interchange all within our minds. And then you have so many people, and they make these very complicated webs of what they want. And when a person appreciates this, they appreciate this is the milah of humanity, that humanity has these very complex desires, these very complex drives. And it's true, it really is complex, it really is lofty. And it's what distinguishes us from everything else in the world. And it's a very difficult thing to say, in a sense, that we're going to take this desire and this complex and nuanced part of being a human, and this desire is a desire for chocolate. A desire for chocolate. Chocolate. It's a drive. It's something that's a drive, and it's really what distinguishes us from the rest of the world is the fact that I have the ability to want chocolate. A rock is unable to want chocolate. A plant is unable to want chocolate, and an animal is able to want chocolate. But chocolate is the example I'm using, Bichlal. So like I could say the desire for for honor or whatever it is. Whatever it is, so you can have a desire that's very complex, and then. And it's even more complex owing to the fact that it's something that comes from a human, that we're the highest form of creation that you have in the world. And a person could take this desire and squeeze it down through himself until ultimately he finds himself walking to the store to buy himself a bar of chocolate. Now, the notion of you have something so lofty and you push it down into I'm actually going to go and do this. You have a desire, and sometimes there's desires that are less, I'm going to say, admirable than chocolate. Chocolate is a very good desire to have. No, but there are some things that people have, they do it. And in order for it to get down into action, it takes a certain kind of forcing. It's not that the person is forced, it's that they're forcing this lofty notion all the way down through Chokhmah, and through Bina, and through Das, through all of the Midas, into Seichel, and into, ultimately, it comes to Maisa. It comes to the point where a person is actually doing it, and it takes, in a sense, this kind of bending down that you have when you have an admission. So that's the comparison. So the Rebbe says, this is analogous, in a sense, to the neshama, that it goes from a very high level. And obviously that's what neshamas are for, right? The same way that you have a desire for chocolate. The reason why you have a desire for chocolate, at least this is what you tell yourself when you're running out to get chocolate in the middle of the night. But the reason why you have a desire for chocolate is obviously because you need the chocolate. The desire for chocolate is obviously very related to the chocolate. It still takes that pushing down that you get it from this lofty desire, which defines us as humans, to the actual, you're just eating a bar of chocolate in the middle of the night. But the neshama is obviously, in a sense, it's quite obvious that it fits the body quite well, and that it's here to animate us. And yet, still, it was in a very lofty place, and it got pushed down into this world. And it's like that. That's that level of pushing for admission. So Yerida and this Yerida is in a way of forcing. The Rebbe quotes the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you're alive against your will. That the neshama's animate is brought down into the world. It doesn't want to be brought down into the world. It's on that very lofty plane. I don't know if you guys ever heard the A.B. Rottenberg song Neshamala. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. This isn't a plug, this isn't an ad, or hashtag not an ad. Well, it's about the neshama. The neshama's up there, and the neshama's learning Torah, and the malach says, okay, it's time to be born. And the neshama says, I don't want to go. I'm sitting up here, and down there's so much garbage. I'm not interested in going down there. And the malach has to convince the neshama. And this is like a true point, that the neshama's up there, the neshama's lofty, and we need to try to drag it down. I mean, not we need to try to, the Eibusher pushes it down. This is how it goes. So Amnam Inyan Haisafa Hu Hefech. The concept of a Heisafa, the concept of Yosef, because remember we're talking about Haidal, which is the Inyan of Yehuda. The concept of Heisafa is the opposite of this. That when you have a concept, for example, an intellectual concept, that the concept is the concept sits well in your mind. Sometimes you can have a concept that you know and you understand and you appreciate, and then you can add to it in your mind. You can say, you can build off of it. You know 2 + 2 = 4, and then you can say, well, what if I make it not just a bunch of blocks that I'm lining up and I'm adding together in a one-dimensional row? I can make it 2 dimensions, and you can build off the concept, and now you've added to it. You've built off of it. You made more out of it. You've taken the original idea that you had, and you said, this idea is not just a simple idea. I can build on it. I can make it more. And this is particularly you could particularly appreciate it when you could build off of the idea more and more. The Indian of, let's say, 2 + 2 = 4 is such a foundational idea in all of our minds that we probably, whatever we know about mathematics is probably built on that at some point, and it's probably one of the legs holding it up. If someone managed to disprove 2 + 2 = 4, math would probably really suffer. But all of the notions that we have of mathematics, well, now they're all built on that notion. And that's the Indian of Haisafa, that you have an idea, and not just that the idea, you push it down to some degree, not just that, but you can add to it more and more. This is the concept of true Chachma and Seichel, that you're able to take an idea and you're able to build on it ad infinitum. And one of the abilities that a person has is the ability to use his bina, which is called the broadening of the river. Which is that you're increasing and you're going and you're increasing more. That you can add in a concept of explanation and of intellectuality. That when a person has an idea, and originally it's just a spark of inspiration, but then a person sits and they think about it, they can build on that idea so much, they can broaden that idea to a very great extent. This is the real kavanah of pilpul and of shaklavataria, of give and take in learning. When you have a give and take in learning, you're not just trying to argue with your chavrasa, even though it's very fun. When you have a give and take in learning, you're trying to broaden your understanding of the concept, and very often you do. When you argue with someone about a concept, you get to a better understanding. But you take, again, the original idea, and you manage to broaden it. You manage to make it bigger than it was before. This is the opposite of the inyan of forcing and of admission. Because in the min hamadaber, in humanity in general, and refrat in yidin, seichel is something which sits in your mind and it's stable, and you can increase on seichel to a very great extent. So just to explain where we're holding, I think we'll stop here because it's 8:39. But just to recap, we're saying that there's 2 contrasting ideas. There's a concept of Haidah, there's a concept of admission, there's a concept of saying that there's something that's bending yourself down, and that's the notion of you take a will and the will gets forced down into action. And it's in general the notion of taking something lofty and forcing it down into a lower place. That's the nature of something. That's the nature of will. Will is, in a sense, designed to come down. The neshama is, in a sense, designed to come down. You have other things like seichel. Seichel is designed that everything should increase on seichel. That the seichel just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So these are 2 things that we have.
You can't pull down Hoda?
No, Haidah is something to pull down.
But you can't build on it. You can't build on it?
You can't to build on it. You can't build on Haidah. Wills don't get built on. You don't have a will, and then because I have this will, I now have another will. Sometimes a person could intellectualize on their will, and they could say, "Well, why do I have this will?" And they think about it, and the thinking is what gives you the ability to add. Because seichel, its nature, is the concept of increasing in that way. The will get drawn down. If the will gets into seichel, the seichel will add another will, but the will itself won't add something else. What?
They can interconnect then.
What, wills?
No, Hoda can then
Yeah.
push into Seichel where that would then increase.
Yes, but it would be the seichel that's increasing. It wouldn't be the Haidah.
But they're not mutually exclusive.
They're not mutually exclusive. They all exist within us. These are all faculties within us. There won't be two kingdoms. There will be one kingdom. We're getting there, Hashem.
No. Go ahead.